lobbying is a vilified industry. Fortunately, in the ag world, I think we work the way it's supposed to. It's supposed to work for the constituents, and the constituents do have an impact on their elected officials. If you got the smaller part of the industry taking on it, well, more established, it's going to take you a while to turn that boat. If you give up and don't engage, then the boat's never going to turn.
Today we got Mark Rockela on the podcast. Mark lives in Washington, D.C., is a landlord of mine up here in Minnesota. That's how we met. And I organic farm some of his acres. And Mark, you spend a lot of time down in D.C. doing lobbying.
Correct. I've worked on almost every title of the Farm Bill except for the nutrition title. Everything from commodity title, Title I, conservation, trade, all the way through to the energy title. Almost every title of the Farm Bill over my 20-some years in Washington, D.C.
Okay, so help me understand titles. Like, how are these things organized?
So the Farm Bill has different sections. It's essentially different sections.
Okay.
Different chapters of the Farm Bill. So they've got the concept, or the Title I is the commodity titles. Sets all the loan rates, which makes talks about which commodities are eligible for the programs. All of those type of things. That's really what you go into the FSA for. That is that's the big title. That in terms of farmers' interest, and then the other one where you spend most of the money on is nutrition.
Okay. And that's the one you've not.
Correct.
All right. So the nutrition part, is that animal people?
No, that's all the feeding programs, SNAP,
Okay.
WIC, and all those. Those are all part of that. Those are all done at USDA and fed, and those programs are feeding people throughout the country. So that's where you get your SNAP, your women and infant children's, WIC programs. Those are all run out of USDA.
So nothing to do with the actual nutrient value of the food.
Correct.
Okay.
In fact, that's one of the concerns with the Farm Bill is as you start looking at those next step of how do you grow those industries. There's not programs developed around the nutrient density of foods. There's not programs. The Constitution protects the right to petition your government. So everyone can come into DC and go meet with their member of Congress or anyone else that they want to meet. That's protected by the Constitution. And that whole industry has started around helping different groups, trade associations, nonprofits, corporations, for-profit groups, all working on explaining policy to policymakers. And that's policymakers. I describe policymakers as members of Congress that write the laws, and then the decision makers, and then the decision implementers, all the agencies. So you have in a perfect world, you're able to work with the agency people and talk to them, explain to them how that policy is being implemented out in the country.
Lobbyists and lawyers kind of run in the same camp for how much people love them, right? And but as I've grown and realized, there's only so many people that you can meet with in a day and do something with that information. And so if there's 350 million people in the country and even 1% wants to talk to somebody, right? So you're looking at 3.5 million people who want to talk to a few hundred?
350 some for the House representative and 100 senators.
That would be
that's
1,000 days.
That's a lot of meetings.
1,000 meetings.
That's a lot of meetings.
And then what if you have the wrong meetings? What if you don't have the right people? Because I've learned, you take these ideas and it takes you 5 times to get to the right person. This is how you want to direct that, right? And I think I've always been pretty neutral about lobbyists because I don't have an opinion. I don't know anything about it as much. But what I'm really interested in is like, how does this all actually, when I say actually work, but like what actually happens and what in the background? Because when you grow up in the farming world and things are pretty scarce, right? It's easy to point the finger at Washington. But there's a lot more going on in this giant recipe than what meets the eye.
Wow. That's a 2-hour conversation right there.
Let's go. I think so it's bringing value, right? In perception.
Right. Yep. When I first started my career off the farm, I went to work with the Minnesota wheat growers up in Red Lake Falls and helped them develop their policy requests. And then I took that down to St. Paul and helped them then implement, work, essentially write their talking points. I was the guy that's down there watching the day-to-day stuff. And then when things were happening, you want members of Congress and elected officials want to hear from your constituents. So what I would do is I would call the chairman of the barley growers, say, Gerald, you need to call so-and-so to, and here's your talking points, because here's what they're working on. So I was that guy that did all the stuff behind the scenes, because these guys, with a lot of these commodity groups on these rural areas, they all know these elected officials better than I ever will. But the thing that they need help on is just what do they say and when do they say it? And that's really what I spend most of my time on, is monitoring the process of developing legislation or appropriations bills to fund appropriation bills for USDA or ARS. And then at the appropriate time, have these constituents weigh in, because you're going to get, you don't have an unlimited time to call them.
Yeah.
You're gonna want to focus on when is the most important time. You just don't call them up and talk about, got 4 inches of rain yesterday, and couldn't get the hay up, got rained on, because they don't have that kind of time.
Yeah.
When I was when I went from state lobbyist and I went to work with a congressman that represented the farm at the time, David Mingy. So all those groups that I represented, the sugar beet guys, the wheat growers, the barley growers, Jerome Foods out of Barron, Wisconsin, and turkeys. All of a sudden, those guys were all my constituents coming in to visit with me as to what their concerns were with the Farm Bill or with EPA or trucking and transportation. And they all had staff in Washington, D.C. to essentially, say, here's what's going to be going on in the next 6 months, in terms of whether it's transportation bills or funding or farm bills, or, you've got, you've got a drought in Minnesota. You need to get in there and explain what's going on, because if, I have numerous times when my senator from Wisconsin would ask me about a current issue, that a vote was coming up, and they're like, so what have you heard from constituents? If I've heard nothing, I say nothing. Yeah. And obviously then, it's not, and then he's like, okay, well, no one's calling in, it's not an issue. But, if I've got people calling in or organizations, in their meeting with me saying, here's our concerns, here's what's going on, here's where the direction we want policy to go, then I can take that and look at that language and whatever they've written, their talking points, figure out how it fits into the legislation, and then advise the elected official on what his constituents are asking for and what and how we should vote on different issues.
Okay, so I got 2 questions. We're gonna go back first and ask you about, I know you grew up on the farm.
Yep.
You got into that, and I want to hear that part of it. But then I also want to hear after that about, I think I'm starting to hear there's different types of lobbying. Yep. So let's go back. Like you grew up on a dairy farm.
Dairy and hogs.
Okay, I didn't even know it was hogs.
Yep.
Okay. What made you, I mean, there's so many kids who don't leave the farm. I think
Right.
more in your generation than mine, but
Yep. Well, it was also the time of the 80s farm crisis, and some family businesses really work well together, and you look at that long-term plan, and you just there was some decisions that need to be made.
Mhm.
And also I'm allergic to all fur-bearing animals, grain dust, moldy hay. So you throw all that in there,
yeah,
and then all of a sudden you're like, maybe it's time.
Yeah.
So I did a number of gap years, 4 or 5 gap years, and then went to college.
Okay.
So when you start college, 4 or 5 years after you graduate from high school, you take a little different, approach to your studies.
Oh yeah. Yeah. How did you get interested in the legal or I mean, I think having grown up in agriculture is what's shaped you.
Yep.
And being the field that you're in. But like how did you get into law or
Well, it wasn't so much the law right away, but when I decided to quit farming, all my friends asked me what I wanted to do. I kind of joked and said, I want to sell wheat to the Russians. Well, here's my first job with Minnesota Wheat Research and Promotion Council. And that first summer, I had 15 Russian wheat buyers that I toured around the metro area.
Man, you got to be careful what you say, don't you?
And then I'm like, wow, that's my first job. And I did. Maybe I set my goals a little low.
Yeah.
But then I also through college, and when I was talking to my advisor, and he said, yes, well, a lot of younger students, when they start, in college right out after high school, I got to think about how this worked, how he said it, because one is how it works. How does the biology work? How do the different things, because you're trying to figure out, as a younger, how everything works. And then as you're older, it's, well, why does it work that way?
Yeah.
Why does?
Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah. So why does these economics work? Why does this policy work and this one? So you take a whole different approach to your education. And I did 5 internships when I was in college.
Wow.
And I'll give you that college diploma off my wall before I give you those 5 internships.
Oh yeah.
And because I learned more from those 5 internships about what I wanted to do and what I didn't want to do.
That's almost
it's just as important to know what you don't want to do.
Yep.
And I actually started at University of Wisconsin River Falls. It was a great school. And my first, I had a workstation job in the TV studio, so I could do my homework, and we'd show the video of football games, and just flip the tapes in and out. That's not really an internship. It was just something completely different than what I'd done before.
Okay.
But I did a quarter abroad where I studied the Dutch farm organizations, which really opened up, got you into this whole policy discussion, because at that time, and our policies are still much more different, but you had an understanding of how that worked.
Mm-hmm.
Then I came back and I did an internship with the Corps of Engineers, and there I was a social economics student, and I did all their grunt work for the numbers in terms of like floodplains and those type of things. Then I did an internship, and these are going to fall out of order. I did an internship with the Minnesota Agri-Growth Council, where I was working, essentially following them around at the state capitol, going to committee hearings, tracking legislations as it was moving forward, amendments that were going to be offered, because nothing happens. Very few surprises happen in a committee hearing, both state and federal, because if I'm the chairman, I'm going to be pulling all my members of, okay, what's your concern with these bills? And you're going to tell your chairman, it's like, okay, here, I'm going to need to offer this amendment, that amendment, and do those type of things. And in a perfect world, you kind of work all those things out beforehand, so you've got a quick and easy markup.
Okay.
But there's some things you can't do, and that's will end up in a public discussion about how, about that policy. And then there'll be, and also, what amendments are going to come up, and you're also, you're going to count your votes.
Yeah.
To see who's on my side and who's not.
Yeah.
And, that also, if your opposition doesn't have the votes, like, oh, go ahead, bring it up.
Yeah.
And because you're going to win.
Yeah.
So, so I did that. I also did my last year of school. I realized that I was going to be back in the working world. So I went to University of California, Davis. And they have a class in sustainable and organic agriculture. They're one of the leading organic, research institutes. They actually have a organic student farm there. And it was really, really interesting. It was
what type of crops?
Pretty much all crops, mostly, things raised in California, West Coast.
Okay. So high or
a lot of vegetables,
produce.
High produce.
Yeah.
There's no soybeans, corn. They had some alfalfa in there, but different types of rotations.
And what year was this?
Ooh, man. 1990.
Okay, 1990, somewhere around.
So
like this is like early development of the organic market.
Yeah, very early.
Okay.
Very early. And so those were all things that, those had more of a formative impact on my career choices than anything I did at school.
Okay.
But you still had to get that sheepskin to hang on the wall.
Yeah.
Because all your competition had it.
Yeah.
And they're going to like, well, they all have the same experience as you. Why am I going to hire you over them when they've got a college degree? I can get more for my money from them.
Yeah.
So that's, so then, that all led into the next steps of what do I want to do, and bring these Russian wheat growers around. And then I had an opportunity I started my own lobbying business in St. Paul with wheat, barley, sugar beets, turkey, and Jerome Foods, the grocery growers. And I was doing that for 3 years and was in the process of going to double the size.
How did you jump
from the wheat growers?
Yeah.
I was living up in Red Lake Falls, Minnesota.
Yeah, that's way up there.
Yeah, it's way up there in a town of a couple hundred people. As a single man.
Yep.
And most of my social life was down here. And I was also they were moving me down here to work on so I'd spend 3 months whenever the state legislature session was going, they'd move me into an apartment. So I'd be down here. And then the summer, I had at the peak, I think we had 12, 13, 14 trade teams. Well, each trade team was about a week. So over the summer, I was on the road for those 13, 14 weeks. And as I was traveling with some of the farmers back to, up to the Red River Valley, I jokingly said, why don't you guys just hire me and put me down there and you guys stay up here and do this. And when I need you, and no one said no.
Oh.
So I'm like, here's a business idea. So I put it in front of 4 groups and damn, next thing you know.
Okay.
It was going.
Huh.
So that's how, it's just kind of one of those opportunities, situations, exposure. I had the network.
Yeah.
And people knew what I was a known commodity by that point in time in terms of what I wanted to do.
Because you were already working with all the people down at the local Minnesota Capital.
Yep, down in St. Paul. So I was a known commodity.
Mm-hmm. They knew your brand, who you.
Yeah, they knew I knew agriculture.
Yeah.
They knew, because it's a lot of work to attend all these meetings, committee hearings, do all your research, write the talking points, and then get it back to them. And that was the type of lobbying that I've always have done.
Mm-hmm.
And not all lobbying organizations are set up in the same manner.
Okay.
So I was more from that grassroots up.
Yeah.
And there are other groups who are more from that grass tops who are reaching straight into the member and don't have the policy depths and the backgrounds and then are going out to their clients or the companies or whoever they're working for, healthcare companies or technology,
So let's talk about, you have your style of lobbying, which still seems to me, I mean, we've never worked together as a full disclaimer, but on the lobbying front yet, we'll say yet. But
Good, I like that.
yeah. So there's a lot that I don't know with it, but it seems to me the lobbying that we visualize is large corporations sending people in to get their memo across or to get change, but that doesn't seem like it matches with what you're doing as much.
Correct.
So talk about what you're doing more, and I want to lay the landscape of, we'll call it the other types of lobbying.
Well, again, I'm a policy expert.
Okay.
I focus on the policies. I know the agriculture industry pretty well, the food industry pretty well, and understand the direction it's going, the changes that are going to happen. The younger consumers, picking up that, that product and we're like, what is this 7 syllable word I can't pronounce, and why is it in my food? So you're seeing that whole industry kind of change. So I can position my clients to be at those forefronts and show that they want to be leaders in that organization or that industry. And what that does is then when policy people, USDA has questions, like, let's call Mark, because he's got those ties to the industry.
Oh, got it.
And he knows, and I'll never forget when I told my sister I was going to be a lobbyist. She says, "Why would you want to do that? All they do is lie." And I looked at her and I said, "If I ever lie to a staffer, they're never going to work with me again. I'm only as good as my word."
Yeah.
And I actually had that situation where I was lobbying for a client, and they have a Grassroots client. They brought all of their people in, and they went to meet with a friend of mine, and they didn't talk about anything that we had put together for them to talk about. They got in some things on their local issues that were different than what the trade association was for, and they gave them misinformation, wrong information, and the staffer knew it. And I saw that staffer a day later, and she says, "Mark, here's what they did, and here's what they told me." And I knew it was wrong. I said, "You can tell those guys they don't have to worry about coming back in my office ever again."
Okay.
So,
So that was like one of your clients that went and visited the staffer?
Yep. Client that had
Okay, and a staffer is somebody who works underneath.
Works for elected official.
Okay. Yeah.
And they're a policy expert. All these elected officials have, it depends on the committees you're on. If you're on the ag committee, you've got an ag person. If you're on the budget committee, all the different committees that you have someone that is divided up among all the different issues, tax issues, transportation, conservation, education, healthcare.
Yeah.
Every industry has pretty much a committee to discuss those issues. And there's a lot of very talented people on both sides of the political spectrum there. And these guys went in and misled their elected officials
intentionally.
From what I can tell, yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And because they had their own point they wanted to get across, and once my friend figured it out, she's like, "They're not welcome anymore."
Yeah. Well,
So I mean, you're only as good as your word. And if you can't be, people can't trust your word, that gets around in a hurry.
Right.
And you will figure out in a hurry who you can work with and who you can't.
Yeah.
That's successful staffers. I mean, same in your industry, who you can work with, who you can trust, who is going kind of that same direction. And those are the type of people you want to work with. And so,
well, I think what's interesting, right, is like time is like, we talk about renewable, non-renewable. Time is non-renewable, and that's like that one. We have no idea how much time we have left.
Yep.
If we're going to make impact, if we're going to make a difference, we've got to work with people that we know, like, even if they're wrong, it was because they understood or just had bad information. It wasn't because they were afraid of an image of themselves, or they were trying to play a game to get a different result, right? Because
But when you say wrong, they won't look at, they won't look at you and say, well, I'm not wrong because I just look at this, from a different standpoint than you, and I don't think I'm wrong.
I'm getting a little bit more into the black and white effects, 'cause there is a ton of gray area.
Oh yeah.
Right. But like
area.
sun is up, sun is down. Like, hey, you know what? I was from a different time zone. I just completely spaced this, whatever it was. Right. Like there's going to be disconnects. But you got to work with people who are going to own it.
Yep.
And then you can, and we're all going to screw up and say,
there will be mistakes, but the key is just to own them, like you say. There's always we have meetings, all my clients now. When I was a congressional staff for 7.5 years, I can count on 2 hands the number of thank you notes I had. Just, thank people meeting with me just to say, following up to say thank you.
Who are you a staffer for?
I was Congressman Mingy from Minnesota, Southwest corner, and then Senator Cole from Wisconsin.
Okay.
And so out of those, one a year.
Wow.
Guess who I remembered?
Those people.
Yeah. Yep. And so it's just that common courtesies.
Yeah. Just extend a little gratitude.
Yeah. Because when I was a congressional staffer, there would be days like all my meetings were 30 minutes.
Okay.
And start at 9:30, 10 o'clock. Go till noon. If I was lucky, I'd get a noon break or a noon half hour for lunch. Go back to my desk, grab a sandwich, look at all the voicemails I had, and then my emails, and then go from 1 till 4:30. In terms
how do you take all that information and do something with it? Because you have to have time for that, right?
Yep. That's where a good lobbyist comes in. Because I would always take all those, there's a 1-pager. All my clients had to write a 1-pager about who the company is. And there's another page about, here's the issue. And we do all of our background work before we even go in.
Okay.
So so you know what the issue, we're like lawyers in that manner, because you walk in there and you need to explain the information, or explain the situation, how it's impacting their constituents, and here's the solution. And many of my colleagues would
see that last part though. Here's a solution.
Yep.
How many % of people bring that?
Actually, there's a fair amount, because if they're working with lobbyists who understand that process, then
but without the lobbyists,
without
right?
the lobbyists, then
that's the gap in a lot of this is like,
yep.
One of our conversations, and I want to talk about it because one of our things is in our CFS, our core values is problem solvers.
Yep.
Bringing solutions.
Yep.
But that looks so different everywhere. And one of the things that we were talking about, you asked me, what is your ask? What is your what
is it? Yep.
What can we do to help you? And it was like, we're saying all these great things that are going to come up and happen.
All the great ideas, because you guys are going the right direction as the ag industry was working to become more sustainable. The current definition, is you got to take petroleum products out.
Mm-hmm.
And so you guys have got that replacement for those petroleum products in terms of fertilizers.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's why you've seen a huge increase in, the market for like turkey litter, pork litters, all those, all those waste, when I was farming with my dad, I just thought he was cheap and didn't want to put fertilizer on because it costs money.
Yeah.
Because he was, occasionally we had enough hay, he'd plow down 20 acres. In the spring, you'd haul all that manure out there from the manure packs.
Yep.
He provided all his fertilizer, back and then we were raising 140, 150 bushel corn.
Oh, that was really good.
So with just, with very, very little, I never remember putting any anhydrous ammonia on. Every once in a while, if the weather was really wet. I remember once or twice doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, we had, the alfalfa would place all that nitrogen, 3-4 years of alfalfa. We had very, great weed control, great soil quality. All those, that nitrogen was fixed and then plowed up and then put, pig waste, dairy waste out there, manures out there, and disc her in and plant it down, and away you go.
Yeah.
So now I forgot where I was going with that.
We were just talking about lobbying and not knowing necessarily how to bring a solution or know what our ask is, right? So maybe let's go with. And
I think where I want to go is, as you look at, all these companies have, you got a financial person, someone that helps you understanding the finances.
Yep.
You've got your production people.
Yep. Operations.
You've got your COOs, CFOs.
Yeah.
You have these specialty areas that you bring in experts to run that for you. And there are, with certain organizations, certain industries, at a certain point in time, need to have someone that's engaged with, the federal government in terms of some of your regulations and developing a new industry, industrial hemp.
Mm-hmm.
As you develop, these new grades. We've got $500,000 for the cereal disease lab in St. Paul to focus on industrial hemp and really on fibers and all the different products. So it's gone over. USDA's love this because they've got Ag Research Service lab that has now focused on just grading those fibers, figuring out how to, create that market, those standards, and moving that all forward. And, it was a group like AURI that stepped in and did that because, a lot of those startup companies, they were busy running their companies.
Yeah, no, it's a whole different game when you're smaller.
Yep.
And then the cost of R&D is pretty outrageous.
Yep. And not only smaller, but just when you're starting that industry, you've got so many other, you got to stay in business first.
Yeah.
If you can't stay in business, it doesn't matter what the federal government's doing.
Right.
What policy options or, what solutions you can have to fix the problem so you can continue to grow your business.
Yeah. So going back to your brand of lobbying, right? I mean, I kind of like to envision every person is a brand.
Mm-hmm.
Whether one of the things we talked about was honesty, right? You gotta have that in all situations. And then when you work with people that they're the right fit, it's because why?
Well, I'm specialized in that ag space.
Yeah.
And, I'm positioning myself to kind of be known as a thought expert in kind of these developing industries in, the digest state, the fertilizer, that organic space, the changing food space, because that's, when you look at growing your industry, like, you're looking to grow in CFS, you're looking at where is this going, what's happening, and you're trying to place, get in front of that all so you can be that leader to move that all along and increase your sales and, show value to your customers. Well, I'm doing the same thing to potential clients out there, is showing that, that I can help them reach their business goals with the federal government by being engaged in those activities. I've done a lot of work in that renewable energy space.
Okay.
Almost every place in that renewable energy, from soy diesel, ethanol, cellulosic ethanol, wind, solar.
So examples of like success, right? Where you take your client and your network and you put that to work in some of those specific areas.
Solar company, they had a concentrated solar system with all these mirrors that would focus up to, this tower that had a mirror on top to collect it all that energy. Helped them win two things. One, the solar company, I helped them win a $40 million investment tax credit to help them build a project. And then their cellulosic ethanol arm, I helped them get I think it was $10 or $15 million grant to build that cellulosic ethanol plant.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, there's two.
So tax credits are going to be kind of a jump starter, right? Where you can be like, all right, well, I don't have to pay tax, so I can really get my base set.
Right.
And roll for when this.
Depends on the type of tax credit, but yeah, that's.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And then grants are, so you'll help grant write for the right projects.
Help grant write. Normally on grants that big, they want someone inside because that they know that industry much better than what I will, so they can do it more efficiently. So it all depends on the topic and the client. I've done some, helped write some grants, but yes, that's the type of thing where you may, depending on what you're after, and how competitive it's going to be. But there's also times when, and I've had companies or I've had clients where I've just, it wasn't working and we just split ways. Yeah, that's a given, right? Because they were more interested in tilting at windmills than they were on actually accomplishing something. Oh, just in getting the work and the dollars than actually the big picture, accomplishing the mission. Because it's like, well, we represent farmers and our farmers say we want X. It's like, okay, but the discussion has happened between M and R. And you want X, which is way out there. So as a congressional staffer, I'm thinking, okay, or maybe it's even better for funding. Funding is opportunities. It's programs funded at $10 million in this House, $20 million in the Senate. You come in, tell me you want $60 million. I'm like, aren't you guys paying attention to the discussion here? Because here is the parameters of our discussion. I can't go out there and go at 60 because my boss is going to like, Mark, what's wrong with you? Yeah. I mean, here's the decision. Yeah. And so I actually had the regulator of them would finally look at me toward the end of the agreement. It's like, Mark, they're not helping your brand at all. Oh. And I'm like, thank you. And shortly after that, it left. Yeah. They left because you can find new clients around. But again, if you go back where you're working with a regulator, at USDA or any of the agencies or a Hill staffer, and you burn that bridge, wherever they go, they're going to remember that. Yeah. So who do you know most of the staffers for most of the elected officials, or how does that work? No, because you don't need to know them. Because what you're going to do is you're working on a farm bill issue. You're working on creating a fertilizer standard. It's like, okay, who are the two groups, or who's the groups that are going to have that impact on that? It's going to be EPA and USDA. So who are the committees that work with EPA and USDA? It's Energy and Commerce and the Ag Committee. So where is this industry located? You guys, for example, Cokato, Minnesota. Okay. So it's Minnesota. Okay. So you got 2 senators and they have 1 House member, maybe more if you've got different locations of production. So you figure out where those are, and those are your base and potential champions. Okay. Because you can go to guys in South Dakota or North Dakota or Wisconsin, and they're going to say, okay, where's your first thing they're going to do? The gatekeepers, when you call, they're going to say, well, where are you calling from? What's your zip code? And they're going to type it in. They go, not in our state. Well, let me send you to your elected official. So then you get sent. So it's the elected official's job to communicate in between other departments then for different. Well, to a degree, yes. Yes. Because, I do, for one client, we created the USDA's first non-GMO process verified program seal. It's a Minnesota company. They were trying to figure out how to add value to their non-GMO soy milk. So what we did is I took the company in, and worked with, had informal conversations with Hill staff that understood the AMS program, the constraints in the program, what their jurisdiction authorization was, and like, we think USDA can do this. So we went into the client, met with, everyone, all the people in the bowels of USDA that would authorize, work on that program, that knew it, had been working on it for 30 years. And I say, we think we can do that. So the next step is I go up to the political people at USDA and say, okay, here's what we want to do. And I say, well, what do the bureaucrats say? I said, you can do it. So we
So
start.
The bureaucrats understand the rules and the laws, down to the T.
Down to the details. Yep. So once they understood what you want to do, then then they can get behind it and say, you may have problems here and there, but overall, they kind of give you the thumbs up. And then then you go up to the political people, and then they kind of the idea starts filtering down, and when they get down to the guys who work in the program daily, you know what they're going to say because you've been in and briefed them on what they want to do.
Yeah.
So so that's
you guys start inside out.
Yep. And each client has different issues, so you've got to kind of develop there's not a standard cookie cutter type of strategy.
Yeah.
Each one's unique, each one's different, because each one of the congressional offices have their own personalities, their own legislative goals. Congresswoman Fishbach's going to have completely different legislative goals than Senator Klobuchar.
Yeah.
Which you expect.
Yep.
So you just need to then be able to talk about your issues kind of in their language.
Let's make up scenario. Let's say we want to create an index, a benchmark program for manure, which actually is something we'd like to do in the future, but it's a long ways out.
So when you say a benchmark program, what does that mean?
So,
because the Center for Farm Financial Management, who used to be a client of mine, they have that benchmarking idea for farms and for organic farms, and how you can benchmark your production. Is my seed cost too high? Are they too low? Am I fertilized? So that's my baseline for benchmarking.
Yeah. So all right, we have these different systems for manure.
Yep. When you say different production systems or different nutrients,
you have old pit style barns. You have a little bit newer style barns where they maybe drop onto a belt. You have cage free barns. You have California standards, right? So there's less density, and they all produce slightly different manure.
Yep.
But when you take manure right now, kind of the belief is, well, depending if it's a conventional farmer, they don't trust the nitrogen, especially when it comes out of these old style barns, because it's about 50% of it is ammonia. In fact, the manure that we put on, I read to buy more manure last year.
Yep.
It was June when we had that hauled, so I thought I was safe, and it turned out I wasn't.
Yep.
Because you can't really go lay eyes on it. You just
Right.
have to look at the weather window. Well, it was wet and cool in June.
Yep.
So I got too wet of manure. It didn't behave properly, or like I thought I was going to, and we ended up with half the nitrogen that we needed, right? And so how do you take a system that you say, well, hey, this manure is worth X, tied to what? Because I don't love that it's tied. There's no official tie, but a lot of these farms will be like, well, hey, here's the price of MAP, and here's the price of 60. Here's what I'll give you for it, right?
Here's what the competing.
Yeah.
Here's what I have to pay for it.
We're going to call it competing, but we're like talking about apples and squash.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
It's not even apples and oranges, because it's you got carbon, you have all these different things,
all these bugs in there that are living in that will help that soil and the soil quality and the soil health that other fertilizers types don't enhance.
Yep. And that's the great part. Now, one of the downsides is instead of putting 400 pounds an acre, I'm putting maybe 6,000 pounds,
Yeah.
right? Which means my application and logistics costs are significantly higher. So we're trying to figure out like, okay, well, let's start building a program. We have a blueprint.
When you say a program of
That's nationwide. We can start helping farmers say this is the value of your product.
Now, well, my first question would be, is that the role of you guys, or is that a third party, or is that a role that you want the government to set up, like grain standards? Remember, we all know
grade standards. Let's say it's a grade standards
Yeah.
program. We're just spitballing here.
Yep.
I'm part of me says like, keep it what it is. We're going to define our own market.
Yep.
But then I look at greater good. Is it greater good that everybody plays in the same sandbox?
Yeah.
I don't know, right?
Yeah.
I don't have the answer.
Yep. And I mean, that's what we're basically going back to is why did they create the grain standards? Because farmers felt like they're being taken advantage of by these big companies. And so when you brought in your corn, number 2 corn, you knew what the test weight, foreign material, all that stuff was.
Mm-hmm.
And when we kind of start talking about standards for fertilizers, there may need to be some type of third party that tests it and says you followed and again, I'm just kind of making this up because it's been so long since I've worked with it, and the technology, everything's changing so rapidly. If you follow the standards or it comes out of a digester, we would expect it to be in this range.
Yeah.
So you have some type of an idea of, okay, is it going to be how many pounds of N or what percent of N?
Mm-hmm.
And now, and you get back to that whole, you got to put 6,000 pounds on. Obviously, it's a pretty low when you haven't figured out a way to concentrate it so that you can move it around. Mm-hmm. And I assume, your transportations costs are going to be high. You're going to try to figure out ways to condense and concentrate that fertilizer so that you can then start moving around the country more. But I mean, the digestate, there's so many different ways. Well, there's so many different other impacts or lack of impacts from a digestate on soil, because we all know about the dead zone out at the end of Mississippi.
Yeah, nitrogen and phosphorus.
Yep. So are there ways of there may be parts of Minnesota and southeast corner where EPA said you got water problems and you got wells contaminated in city water contaminated with nitrates. If you can figure out a way to to concentrate that nitrogen in a digestate and figure out, and because that's going to attract to that humus and the carbon, everything in the soil, and stay there easier.
All right, so we're gonna just go on down this rabbit hole, because we had some guys at a field day, this spring, and they were talking about how great cover crops are. We're growing, we're carbon sequestering, we're doing all these things. And they were saying, they said, hey, we proved that we got an additional, in that biomass, there was 180 pounds, 185 pounds, right? And they said, we got 34 pounds of nitrogen from plowing that in.
Yeah.
The question was, well, what happened to the other 151?
Exactly.
Right. And so part of me wonders, like, we'll never know all the effects of the actions that we take. There's intended and unintended consequences, right?
Yep.
But are you in touch, you're in the ag world, are you talking to people that are working through cover crop programs, and like right now it's the NRCS that will give you money to plant cover crops?
Yep. Those are all policy discussions that the people that I don't personally have a client worked in the cover crop space, but all the people that are promoting cover crops are in there talking to NRCS to make sure that their cover crops are eligible for those programs. And the NRCS programs, those are all voluntary programs. You don't have to be signed up for those. So it's the people that want to use them, can come in and if you and if we're trying, if the industry wants to develop an ag sector that's production practices that are, more sustainable, moving in the direction of more nutrient density for your food, those type of things, then you need to develop some policies that will encourage people to move that direction. USDA has this conservation innovation grant. And so there's a couple different programs where essentially, companies can work with farmers in certain watersheds. And if you've got a product that will, a nitrogen product that won't leach into the water or will attach, to a soil, and you can keep it there. Well, they can create that. That program can then essentially create a coupon to buy down your cost of your product.
Okay.
So, and I've a couple of companies in Minnesota who have some new technology, ways of looking at keeping that nitrogen. And I don't know enough about technology, but just from a 1,000-foot level, they add this product to the nitrogen. It then helps it attract magnetically to the soil particles, so they stay there.
So it stays charged.
Yep. Yeah. And it stays there. Well, that's a good public use of good public adds value to the public domain. So USDA creates a program to essentially help buy down the cost of those programs.
Okay. So I have a question. I mean, we're CFS is in the center of Manure, and we get a little annoyed, and we understand why. But Manure is extremely demonized, right? And it stinks for one.
Yep.
It's been around the longest for another, but people have definitely done stupid things with it, like putting a pile next to their neighbor's house, or not their neighbor's house.
When we were raising pigs in the spring, we would pump the manure pit out. They smell really good.
Oh yeah.
And the neighbors had this dog. Every time I drove by it, we'd spread it out on top of the soil and work it in. The dog would chase me. One day I got mad at the dog and just turned the PTO shaft on and opened it up and sprayed the dog. So Mom and Dad and Grandma and Grandpa heard about that the next day.
Yeah, I bet they did. I bet they did.
So there's all kinds of stupid things that we've done.
Yeah. Yep. Perfect example. Thank you. But and I want to make sure I'm not ignorant on this, but we know
there is a definitely negative brand and stigma among the general public to manure.
For sure.
Because one is you've got, the environmental groups have tied manure issues to the larger farms.
There's some truth.
Yeah. The hog farms, the dairy farms. And you do have a lot of waste.
We look at we got 10,000 cow dairies to the west of here.
Yep.
And I'm not opposed to that. They've made a business model. We're in America.
Yep.
My personal feelings don't really matter to how they're doing business. But what can we do better? And I look at when you have that much liquid only travels 1 to 2 miles from that farm.
Move it. So you got to figure out a way to concentrate that, and you figure out a way to remove that liquid and because you're going to
transport it.
Yeah, quickly in a couple of years, a little longer than that, but quickly fill up that soil where you can't put any more nutrients on because it's just all going to go in the watershed.
Well, and the dairy manure is high in potassium.
Yep.
that area is, the soil naturally has a ton of potassium, which is why they're there. They can grow alfalfa for decades and not even put a dent in that potassium level. But so you take that manure, you keep over applying it. Now you've got problems. And that's, I think, to tie into what you're saying, right? Like that's where manure gets the bad name. And so there is a lot of regulation. There's a lot of tracking over all of it, but we don't have very much tracking, or if any, on all the synthetic fertilizer. And the thing about manure is it has to go through a cycle. In that cycle, it can actually go into, when it's in the inorganic state, is when it's the nitrogen, it's plant available. And it will either volatilize or leach, meaning go up into the atmosphere. But our atmosphere is what, 78% nitrogen? So that's not necessarily a bad thing. Or it will go right back into breaking something else down, and then it will go back in that state, that circle.
And part of that is because this area is changing so rapidly. You know, the environmental groups have done a good job of explaining their viewpoints on manures and animal waste. And, you know, some aspects you can't really argue with them because, you know, yeah, they're right. And so there's got to be a group that then starts looking at, you know, talking about all the positive things from this nutrient recycling, renewable nutrient that we need to use. The upper Midwest, you know, all of our nutrients come up the river. Because we don't have a fertilizer plant here. So, you know, I think the anhydrous, you know, most comes up the river into Iowa somewhere. And it might be a pipeline a little farther, but all the stuff is going up Red River Valley. It's all trucked up that way. So, you know, if you were to look at what you guys are doing on a larger scale, we could probably cut the fertilizer demand by a third by producing and utilizing locally produced. Recycling those nutrients locally.
One of the challenges with that is the cost, right? Right now our cost is 4x. Of the conventional market, roughly.
But I also think, because compared to the conventional market, but is that conventional market then, you know, including actually some of the other costs that should be associated with it in terms of water quality, some of those other things? You know, it's like
that's the hard part though, because the farmer doesn't really care. They got a bottom line to meet. Because I agree with you, but
it's just like we're deciding to grow alfalfa. You know, there's more than just that crop year. Because you got that. How much does it save you in weed control? Nitrogen applications. So, you know, all of those, that big picture need to be included in all of those numbers to actually make a true value on what those costs are.
So the one more thing about manure, I got another angle I want to go on, but manure is hyper regulated. And I mean, I've talked to the MPCA, Minnesota Pollution Control, right? And those guys, when I talk to them, are pretty sure that I'm just backing up to the nearest lake here and dumping it in, right? And it's like,
that's their image. And so you get in there and create a different brand for your company as what you're doing.
And so we're starting to do that. But the second thing is like there is nothing on synthetic fertilizers. And it doesn't bond to the soil like manure does. Why is that?
Because no one's brought it up and no one's been talking about those issues because...
Is there bigger dollars behind it? Like keeping it quiet?
Because people always love to be conspiracy theorists, but...
Sure.
And maybe a little bit, but, conventional guys have been out there branding their fertilizer for how many years?
I mean, since the 1920s, right?
So you got 100 years of branding your fertilizer, and then the new guys show up, and all these other guys are like, "Oh, well, this is what the industry's standards are. This is what the industry's been telling us for 100 years." No, you guys show up. What do you think we're going to believe?
Right.
So then, and really lobbying is really all education. It's you're educating these policymakers, decision makers. The policymakers, that elected officials, and then the bureaucrats as to how the industry is changing and why they need to update their standards to help these industries grow.
So lobbying is it's really actually essential to beginning to make change.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Because if you got a business to run, you can't be down there working with these regulars all the time, because then you don't have a business.
Yeah.
But someone's got to take the lead to spend some time educating, these decision makers on what's changed and why, and why are these guys different. And that's where I spend most of my time, is just educating those bureaucrats. Going back to the industrial hemp industry, we're working with ARS, the Ag Research Service, USDA, and they're like, we kind of got some ideas about industrial hemp issues, but we're just arm's length away. So we brought those researchers oversee those programs and develop those scopes of work for research. We brought them out to Minnesota, and they went up to Kimball to meet with an industrial hemp producer up there. They, central part of the state. They met with the industry and spent 2 or 3 days talking about what their needs and their concerns are, so that we could develop essentially a scope of work and a direction for developing that industry.
Okay.
And as you look at the anaerobic digestion industry, you've got a great National Trade Association. They do a great job on focusing on, renewable natural gas.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but that's not where you guys make your money.
No.
So, somewhere along the line, there's going to need to be, the people that are working in that nutrient recycling industry are going to need to, kind of take that next step to just get these regulators up to speed on why your product is different and the advantages, and why it's not running through the soil. It's not adding salt to the soil. And so they understand those things, because they're sitting in St. Paul, they're sitting in DC, they're not getting out.
Yeah. And who's influencing them?
Yeah. It's the people that have been, the industry that they're comfortable with and they know that's established.
Yep.
Because as a good bureaucrat, you're not going to take a new concept or idea and own it and run it up the supply chain at a federal agency, and then take it to the top and have the political people say, well, who's pushing this and where's it? Yeah. And it's like, well, it's my own idea. It's like, you just screwed your career.
Yeah.
No one's going to do that.
Okay. So one of the things when as in farming, I was always so frustrated because, you have absolutely feast and famine, less feast, mostly famine years in farming, right?
Yep.
And I was really annoyed because, some of these in sports, you can have an athlete make more money in a single season than most farms will generate over a entire career.
Yep.
And it's like that. Sports doesn't matter. Like at the grand scheme of things,
it's like entertainment.
Yeah. And yet we're farming and we can barely make things work.
Yep.
Like what
we're feeding the country with quality food.
And there's so much purpose to it, right? And I had to really understand it doesn't matter what my personal emotions are or how I feel about that, farming.
Right.
In my case.
And the role of farming in the industry and in the country, and providing nutritious, our biggest problem is overweight.
Right. Yeah, we're creating a lot of cheap calories.
Yep.
But even today, realizing we're creating an abundant source of cheap calories, which is causing a huge, I think Kennedy is kind of spot on here, right? With Maha. And he's choosing his best route to attack it. But
the administration has also realized that there's a lot of there in his nutrition discussions. And if you notice how they target him now to talk less about the vaccines and talk more about the nutrition work.
Yeah. Well, food is medicine.
Yeah, it can be. Yes, you're absolutely right.
I've seen a lot of people that I know when they change their diet, their outlook on life changes.
Oh yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
But let's see, where was I going with this?
Oh, you're talking about Maha and Kennedy, and I think that healthy food and healthy eating is such a grassroots effort that I think, whenever this administration is done, those issues are still going to be there. It's not going to be branded as a Kennedy issue.
Yeah.
Those type of things are that I see is where all the changes are going to happen into the future in terms of food. It's going to be driven by those soccer moms, for lack of a better word. I kind of have a vision of it, soccer mom, what it is, but it's much wider than just that narrow stereotype. Because all people are concerned about what's in the food. What is that 30 letter word that I don't know what it means? Right. Why is it there? What's the impact of all this food in our health? Pesticides. There's one of the big farm bill fights right now is glyphosate, and should the company have, should the states have the rights to go after those companies if the federal government doesn't? That's one of the biggest fights there, and they don't have an answer for that, and that's one of the things holding up the farm bill. And you've got all the Maha moms saying we don't want to give this company any of those rights. You got the industry and the farm groups saying, well, wait a second here. You're going to get rid of glyphosate, and we got to change everything. Yep. So maybe you get rid of it, but you don't do it overnight.
Sure.
There's got to
be middle ground on
that. What's that cost going to be if all of a sudden you just say nope, you can't do it.
Yeah. I have a perception of, we'll call it big time lobbying, right? Where
you have this perception, you hear about all these fundraisers where members of Congress will go place really nice with 15 or 20 lobbyists, and it's anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000 at these events, and you've got an audience with that elected official for 4 days. That's what most people think lobbyists are.
I guess mine was you pay, let's say I'm going to create this new herbicide, and it's got some flaws, but whatever its issues are, I'll find a way to get some scientific data to back up that it's fine. And we might know it's not, but we're still going to push it through, right? Yeah. So when I talk about these different brands of lobbying, I think the brand that most people are aware of is like that style lobbying. Let's make sure we can get this through some way, somehow, so we can, does that actually exist?
Oh, I'm sure it does. I've not worked in that space, but I've heard, I'm sure that.
Well, there's pharmaceuticals or,
You're always looking, you spend all this money on these products, and you want to get them to market. And, there may be things that you don't know about the product or don't appreciate, but you got to make a decision. Do we, go petition the government to try it out, or do we just take the loss on it?
Yeah.
And so, so you always present the numbers, you put, for lack of a better term, your spin on it.
Yeah.
And talk about, why the benefits of this chemical and why you created it to start with. There had to be some type of a good reason why you created it, to, for farmers to use.
Well, and I remember I was going earlier with this. So going back to with the farming, in my personal stance and passion with it, I was frustrated because I felt like food is more important than entertainment.
Yep.
But it doesn't pay as well.
Right.
Which is just asinine to me.
Yep. Oh, I agree.
But it doesn't matter, because that's not how the market works. That's not the rules of the game. We don't have to agree with the rules of the game, but they are what they are.
Yep.
And you have to come around to accepting, like, if this is the game of hockey, you can't go pin the goalie up against the wall and just shoot on an empty net. It doesn't work that way, right?
Right.
Like, they're look at what it is and keep understanding how you can make changes based on that. And like having these conversations is really helpful to see. And And I've understood too, right? A quality relationship. We've been working together for 4 years now. And there's been some, last year was pretty tough, but like you get a really deep sense of trust through those moments when they're tough. Because you really get to learn about people's honesty and their reaction, and like, hey, can I ride the river with this guy?
Yep.
Is he gonna
drown me, or is he gonna save me? Pull me up on the raft when times get tough.
And so you get to earn that trust, but that doesn't happen over a month or 2 months.
Nope.
And so when we look at some of these things that we're trying to do, and we're trying to understand, like, hey, does lobbying make sense? We say, okay, Mark, what does this mean? And now I know that, like, just as you and I have a relationship, you have dozens of these, maybe whether it's the bureaucrats or the staffers or whoever, to be like, hey, does the program work like this or like that?
Yep. Here's how I read the program. Here's the type of things that we're looking to change, and here's why we want to change them.
Yep.
And how does that? Can that be done? What do we need to change the law? That governs the program, or is it a simple rule change?
Sure.
And have those conversations.
Can you talk about some of your like successful ones where you feel like it was really impactful in one of the best ways?
Well, back to this, non-GMO process verified. We had a lot of in-depth conversation beforehand, both with the congressional staff, that had jurisdiction. It was the House Ag Committee. They had a staffer that worked on the agriculture marketing service programs, which included the process verified program. So as we were explaining, the company's needs and wishes and where they wanted to fit in the market, it took a while because they're busy. So you just need some time to let the ideas percolate, let people think about these programs, let me look at it, because I look at it completely different than you or someone else will. And as things start moving along in the discussions, because there's always discussions going on policy, all of a sudden the light bulb goes off. Like, oh, this may work for these guys to reach that business goal. And so that one, I'd worked with a client for a couple of years, and they kind of thought they had some ideas of what they want to do. But once we came up with that idea, they're like, that's exactly what we want to do, is get this, it's a voluntary, third-party verified program to get this label, so that we could go out and advertise this label. And we could sell it to Starbucks or any of these companies, any of these coffee shops that the consumers are asking for non-GMO soy milk.
Yep.
And so they had, you could monetize that brand or that
So this
label.
is a privately held company.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Because the non-GMO project is nonprofit.
Correct.
Okay. So this was probably a predecessor?
This happened. The non-GMO project was looking at legislation, and we were doing a completely, to force everyone to do it. We were taking a different route of a voluntary program. It was not mandatory that every company that do it. So, this PV Best Process Verified program still exists.
Okay.
And so, we took a completely different track.
And it was
very successful for for USDA and the company.
Good.
So that's
so there's actually another example of lobbying that I think, like, hey, non-GMO was like, the non-GMO project was like mandatory, right?
That's and again, I work in the policy space, so I'm helping these companies clients identify what's the policy they want to change, and have those in-depth policy discussions to prepare them for those meetings with those decision makers and those bureaucrats. So those bureaucrats, so we can walk in there and show we're prepared. A friend of mine who worked in the finance committee told a client once we walked in, it's like, we walked through this whole process. We got it done in about 10 minutes. She looked at me and says, Mark, I always love meeting with your guys because they all come in, you guys come in organized, and I know what I need to do. And it's a 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and you've done your homework.
Ready for execution.
Yep. And that's not every lobbyist operates in that manner,
Sure.
because it's all depends on what your background is. When I started a company with 8 of my friends, and there's 4 of us that were ag lobbyists. Well, one of them was the legal counsel for the Farm Bill. So anytime any amendment or anything was written, he was the one that actually physically wrote it. And he'd written 7 or 8 farm bills. And then when we wrote the Farm Bill program,
I'm so glad there's people who love writing that.
Yeah, that doesn't mean it's funded. Then you've got to go over to the Appropriations Committee to get funding for it. And so my other partner was the guy that made the decision on the funding.
Oh, okay.
So there was a number of 10 years, if those 2 weren't involved, and when there were policymakers on the Hill, if they weren't involved in the discussion, it didn't happen.
Oh, okay.
So you start working with those type of people that have that type of understanding of not only the policy, but the process, and how that process, the legislative process, and how members of Congress are going to respond, and the timing, and when you need to get things done, those type of things.
Because you're representing millions of people.
And it's not so much when you're
looking at the overall bill,
who's representing? I mean, who are you identifying?
So this bill though is affecting that many people, right? And not because you're working with the people at the Hill who are representing countless people.
Yep.
And so that's
the House side of each congressional district is about 500,000 people.
Yeah.
And each state has 2 senators, and North Dakota's got 2 senators, Minnesota's got 2 senators, California's got 2 senators.
Mm-hmm.
So they represent a completely different
Okay, so all the considerations to make, how this thing is going to break before you even start building the wireframe.
Yep.
Right? You got to consider how it's going to break.
Yep.
And so it wouldn't pass because the 2 people who were key roles were never consulted. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. But not so much consult. They were involved in the conversation. And it's not like they had the ability to say yes or no. They knew how to frame that argument to their chairmen of their committees so that the chairmen could understand it and then say yes or no.
They knew their audience.
Yep.
Well, they could sell it.
Yep. And then and knowing those guys and how they worked, when I was a congressional staffer, I'd do all the background work, same thing I do with the agencies now and elected officials. I do all the background work, find out what they're going to say, right? The talking points, have the member of Congress then go to the chairman and say, I need this in the Farm Bill for my constituents because X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And then again, then the chairman goes down to the staff and says, please put this in. And they say, okay, well, here's going to be the problems. And I'll get a call and say, okay, or I used to get a call and say, okay, well, here's things you're going to have to deal with. How are you going to solve these issues? And so you try to help them with through some of those things, and that goes up to their boss, and then their boss goes back to your boss.
Okay.
And those are all the elected officials' discussions are completely different than the staff.
Yeah.
And so then it was up to those 2 to figure out how it's going to go.
Okay. Interesting.
So it's completely different than any business type of decisions making process.
Yeah.
And to a certain degree, you look at the bigger, you had mentioned representing millions of people. To a certain degree, that's in the back of your mind. While there's millions of people may be impacted by that legislation or proposal, I'm more interested in representing the people that they elect me.
Yes.
Than I am about the 2 or 3 other million people that may have some impact by it. Everything's going to come back to that district.
Yeah,
and
but the people who support you.
Every good lobbyist is going to find an impact back on their constituents.
Yeah.
And that's what I do, is find those people in the district, As I was working on, some things with mycotoxin infections, I asked you guys, because you guys had, mycotoxin infections of small grains.
Yep.
You guys wrote letters to your senators.
Yep.
Those were influential. Those helped a lot.
Okay. Yeah. That's good to know. Yeah, the more, when I was at ground level, right, when I'm running the farm, when I'm out pounding nails in the field, when I'm spreading manure, like, I wondered like how these people had their head shoved so far, and like, but that's your view, that's your perception. But now, as I've grown and I'm actually getting quite a few layers away from that, I am losing touch fast.
Yeah.
And I'm now in touch with the leaders of the leaders.
Right.
And like you still only have so much time in a day. I have a family that I have, and I'm still going to go to church on Sundays. I'm not going to keep working. I got to sleep. There's all these things. How do you get connected? And that's exactly.
Yep. How do you grow? I mean, you guys are growing. You're creating a new industry. You're creating a nutrient recycling industry.
Yeah.
Who else is out there doing this with you guys?
Nobody that we know of like us. There's other people like doing segments, but nobody that's shaped the same.
Yep. So you can't expect anyone else to go out there and actually help you guys take over and do that for you.
Mm-hmm.
Because what's in it for them?
Yeah.
That's where, back to our conversation about having, you hire a CFO to focus on the finance, the operations, and at some point in time, especially in new industry, you need to have someone, and lobbyists get just lumped in there, but, lobbyists do everything from, the state policies, to the federal policies, help, all that complete direction. And you're really developing a new industry of nutrient recycling, and how do you move that forward?
It's a big question.
Yep.
It's a really big question.
Yep.
And
if you don't do it, if you don't take that lead and try to develop that industry, the industry, your company can grow and you can do it, but you're going to run into some hurdles.
You will, no matter what. Yeah. Right. Like one way or the other, you can be the leader or the.
Yep. But if you start looking at, and you'd probably be a regional company,
mm-hmm.
And you can find a region however you want to. But in terms of, looking at those next steps and actually having an impact and growing, you're going to have to be involved with some of those decision makers to help them develop the industry in the way you want it, not the way someone else wants it. Because if you let the bureaucrats who really don't know much about how it's changing, they're going to make decisions that you're going to go like, you're going to scratch your head and go like, how did that happen? And it's because mostly because they weren't
aware.
They weren't in there talking to people. The industry wasn't engaged with them. That there really needs to be a partnership between the industry and those bureaucrats, so that you develop those relationships, so that when they have some questions on how you do this, you have that relationship.
Yeah. That kind of makes sense.
And then how do you turn that type of work? How do you measure the ROI on that? And that's where, as you, when I work for clients, it's like, okay, you're going to have to go back to your boss as a CEO and show some type of return on investment. What does that mean? How do we do that? And at the same time, you're working on, a parallel path of pushing that industry forward.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to keep both of those in mind.
Let's have a theoretical conversation on nutrient density. You're a lobbyist. Where do you start? What is that like? How do you see like the blocks laying out? Because I'm a huge advocate for nutrient density. Mm-hmm. But how do you see the blocks laying out?
Wow.
Where do you start talking? Because you got we got some manure hurdles we got to cover, because manure is one of the foundations, in my opinion, to getting, I mean, it's a
Because
kombucha.
they're all kind of related, because you go back to that nutrient density or recycling nutrients for plants.
Yep, because healthy soil, right?
Yep. Well, healthy soil, healthy food, healthy people.
Yep, you get manure, which is kombucha for the ground. You got healthier soil, healthier plants, healthier animals. Like,
so you've got more nutrient dense, corn, wheat, alfalfa, strawberries,
cows.
Asparagus. Yeah, cows. So the meat ends up having then more nutrients in it. Yeah,
right.
I mean, our whole system is based on yield.
Yep. Anybody can argue that it's not, but I as a farmer, if you present me with two varieties,
quality
and you say
is B and C.
Yeah, so I can get 160 bushels an acre, but in this one's quality will be like 10 times option B, which will be 200 bushels an acre. Yep. And there'll be no quality. I'm planting 200 because guess what? I get zero credit.
Yeah. So you almost have to create that sub-market where you have the people that are interested in those type of qualities, to create that market for them. And you're starting to see some of that being created. It's
starting to show up.
It's some local markets, it's some individual companies. It's hasn't been able to take off nationwide yet because, you just don't have that national standard. So again, I hate to go back to number 2 yellow corn, but if we know what number 2 yellow corn, every farmer knows what number 2 yellow corn is. Yeah. But every farmer doesn't know what nutrient dense food is. So how do you create that nutrient dense food? We can create it. We know how to do it, I think. But then how do you then reward the farmer for doing it? Right.
That seems to be the biggest gap in all of this.
Yep.
But that's something we'll be working on together here in the future, because I'm pretty bound and determined to figure out how to make it work.
Yep. And I think you guys are going the right direction by tying those all together. And the Rodell Institute in Pennsylvania does a lot of neat work in that space.
I got a friend that works there, so I'll have to talk to him more. Scott Osborne works with Luke Howard.
Okay.
You know either of those?
Nope. Jeff Check, who now is the new CEO, replaced Jeff Moyer. Okay. So I've worked. I know Jeff a lot. Both Jeffs pretty well. They're good. The good people are heading in the right direction.
Jeff wrote a book about soil, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Okay. I think I read that one about not disturbing. I think it's part of the no-till thing. Look, much as I love that concept, I just haven't found a way to make it successful organically, and that's but my argument's I have a different rotation. Yeah. So I'll put we'll measure soil health instead of just soil samples, right? We'll measure soil health. I'll put it on the line.
You got to look at that whole big picture.
Yeah.
We got to look at that long-term, goal of the farm and soil health versus just, what's it look like in 2 years.
So there's Kernza there, which is a perennial small grain. Yep. There's one more out there I can't think of right now. Camelina. But isn't there something we can do with a grass or a alfalfa? Isn't there another? Could that be repurposed? I mean,
in terms of when you say grass and alfalfa,
just building soil health. Is there things that we can do to incentivize movement in a market?
Then it comes back to like NRCS programs. If there's conservation benefits there, then should we be looking at providing a government payment essentially again then to lower the costs? Then how do you pass on, or how does the farmer get that value out of the market? Mm-hmm. And it seems like right now that's a little harder to do. There just isn't set up.
No, it's a tough market.
Consumers, aren't valuing that right now.
Well, you look at even in this area, there is one small dairy farm. He's got 40 cows. Wow. There's one that I can think of probably in the 8-mile radius. And the one that you and I work with is a 500 head.
Yeah. When your mom and dad grew up,
Yeah,
there
there was
was
28 stall barn.
Yeah, there was 30, 40, 50 cow
Yeah.
operations every mile.
Yeah,
half
every
mile.
section had probably 2 or 3.
Yep.
And now there's a whole bunch of empty silos.
Yep.
So it's times change. Again, it goes to the rules of the game.
Yeah.
I was bound to be a dairy guy,
But all the policies have all been tied to yields. Quality has been kind of second.
how do we change that?
Well, again, you've got to
We got
start.
to measure it.
Yeah, we got to measure, but you got to start working with some of these. You either got to create the market for it, and every time you look at creating a new market, there's a lot of times, not every time, but a lot of times they go to the federal government to incentivize some people to do some of those things because you're competing against the companies have been engaged in this for 100 years.
Yeah.
These people got to figure it out. They know how to do it. Then they're keeping the margins pretty lean. So, it makes it real hard for a startup company industry to get going without some type of incentive. And what is that incentive?
Yeah.
It's either consumers saying, yeah, we want that, which, could be some, these farmer markets are working for some of these smaller produce people. But how do you get to that next step to create those markets, on a more larger scale so you get some more commercial production to go?
Yeah. Yep. That makes sense. I don't know. It's such an interesting world. And I had, and I'll admit, like when we sat down, we went to the local cafe, you flew in and you were trying to figure out who's going to farm it. Your land, right? You were like, hey, I'm going to convert this to organic. How are we going to do this? And being surrounded with the group of people that I was with, right? That you're like, well, I guess, the numbers don't work. I'm just going to figure out how to custom farm it. And like, I scoffed, it was like, he ain't going to do that. Well, you did. And like, it's like, there's always going to be naysayers. There's always going to be those, but there's going to be the people who are just going to figure it out and do it.
Going to do it. Yeah.
And
just sacrifice to do whatever they need to make it work.
Yeah. And I mean, you believed in organics enough to be like, hey, I own a couple 100 acres here.
Yep.
I'm going to put my money where my mouth is.
Yep.
It's probably going to suck, which it did.
Yeah. I mean, the organic market's got wilder swings, as price swings, market swings than the conventional market. Yeah. Because they have so many other tools available to them to level out those production, which we don't have yet.
Yep.
So you've got,
Well, lately conventional's been about as wild.
Yeah.
But
that's for all kind of outside tariffs and fertilizer costs and petroleum costs and all those things.
Well, then you got fuel going through the roof, right?
Yep.
So I mean, but ag in general is a volatile market.
Yeah.
And
because there's so many things outside of what we do.
Yeah.
That we can't control that has a huge impact on what we do.
Yep. Exactly. But no, it's been really interesting getting to know you.
Yep. Absolutely.
And working on the land. We've done a lot of cool things together, and I'm looking forward to doing.
I think, like I said, the ag industry is really changing in a direction of sustainability, nutrient-dense food, and I don't think it's not something that's going to disappear or either political administration can stop.
Yeah.
It's driven by the consumers. It's driven by consumers. It's a market demand, and that market is going to pull people. You've seen, a lot of conventional guys trying to figure out how do we become more sustainable, and you and I, what it means to you and I is taking what we have to make it work better. Where some of the other companies, the chemical companies, those guys are like, oh, we got another product to sell you to help make you sustainable. Right. And now, that's not always the direction I want to go, is to spend more money on the farm. If there's a way I can figure out to make use my manure, which I've got from livestock, and it's just a waste, and I can use and make some money off, I'm going to do it.
Right.
Rather than buy your stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, as we wrap up here, do you what's one thing you want our audience to know about you or lobbying, or just kind of a parting?
That's a good question in terms of,
I like to leave it wide open because
Yeah.
everybody answers that whatever's present.
The industry's got a lot of critics, and there are problems with the process. As we've got, there seems to be more and more money involved in the campaigns, and it's illegal to be tying a policy issue to a political campaign, right? Political contribution, I should say. So that it's illegal to tie those two together. You can't walk in and say, well, if you give me $5,000, I'll do X for you.
Yeah.
Or as a lobbyist walk in and say, well, if I give you $5,000, would you do X?
Yeah.
And that's illegal.
Okay.
But there's still people who do it and they get caught. There's been people that's gone to jail for that.
Sure.
So, I think the thing is that, it's also like being an attorney.
Odds are it's a lot more than 5,000, but yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, there's legal limits. If you're, they do a very good job of keeping an eye on making sure that you're within those legal limits.
Okay.
So you can make contributions for the primaries and for the elections. There was, I know a former lobbyist I worked with who, got money to his parents, his gardener, a couple other people, and they all maxed out to him. And they're like, well, as they started looking at what he was doing, where the money was all coming from, they're like, how's a gardener have the capabilities of maxing out to $5,000 or $10,000?
Yeah.
And then as they started, investigating, it's like, he gave me the money.
Yeah.
So, there is, there's some of the dark money, some of those type of things that aren't always policy related, that it's more of, the campaign, or the left or the right, or, going those directions. But it's, lobbying is a vilified industry. Fortunately, in the ag world, where, I think we work the way it's supposed to. It's supposed to work for the constituents, and the constituents do have an impact on their elected officials. And, it's, maybe taking on, if you got a smaller part of the industry taking on it, well, more established, it's going to take you a while to turn that boat.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
If you give up then and don't engage, then the boat's never going to turn.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on. It was actually fascinating hearing all this. And
cool. No, it's a fun industry, and there's no way you can explain to anyone what you do or how you do.
You're one of those guys. Yeah. Yeah. What do you do again?